Now, Dave's here to talk about surveillance. As you can see, Dave, we've got a lot of interest in this. We have a criminal justice committee that has been working on surveillance. I'm not sure whether I know they've taken action in Chula Vista. I don't know about San Diego. So let's hear from you, and then we'll get more from them. Good to have you.
Awesome. Well, it is good to be here. I'm really happy to talk to you all. My name is Dave Maass, and I am Director of Investigations at the Electronic Frontier Foundation, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. I'm also a scholar in residence at the University of Nevada, Reno's Reynolds School of Journalism, where I lead a project called the Atlas of Surveillance. And I'll also talk about that a little bit more as well. But some of you may remember me from a decade ago when I was a staff writer at San Diego CityBeat, and I was there for almost 4 years. And although I have not lived in San Diego for a decade, my heart is still there. You guys can feel free to return it whenever you want, or you can keep it. I don't care. Eventually we'll make it back there, I'm sure. But anyhow, so today I've put together a presentation that is specifically on border surveillance. So I didn't prepare a lot of slides about your regular police surveillance, although I'm happy to talk about that at the end. But specifically, I wanted to focus for this committee rather than the Criminal Justice Committee on specifically either stuff from the various Homeland Security agencies, some stuff that's being used by local agencies, and then if we have time, a little bit about what's going on the Mexican side of the border. I've tried to highlight throughout this talk where there's something relevant to San Diego, and my interpretation of San Diego, I've also included Imperial County just because there's so much overlap between the two. But this talk is actually going to cover most of the whole border because I feel like it is useful for people in San Diego to know what's going on with CBP in Texas, even if it's a little bit different, because what's going on in Texas may go on in San Diego in the next few years. You just never know how things are going to drift from the various strategies across the border. And certainly what goes on in Southern California is different than what's going on in Arizona, which is different than what's going on in South Texas, but there's a flow. So I've got a bit of a slideshow, and I will go ahead and share screen now, and we'll jump into it. All right. And if I guess Burl, if people have questions and put them in the chat, I won't be able to see them. Could you just call them out if they come up?
Yeah, we'll save them for the end, Dave.
Okay, great. I'll actually take a few pauses throughout for questions because I've got stuff that we can talk about as a bonus. Or, there's certain parts that are more going to stir more questions and might be more important to answer than some of the other stuff. I just want to make sure I had enough slides. Okay, so if you're unfamiliar with the Electronic Frontier Foundation, our headquarters are in San Francisco, but we work at the local, state, national, and international level. We exist to ensure that people's rights and freedoms are not just protected as technology grows in our society, but are actually enhanced and advanced. We work on issues related to privacy, free expression, innovation, government transparency. If it involves technology, we're probably involved in it in some facet or another. And we have three main disciplines at EFF. We have lawyers who do litigation, we have people who do activism and advocacy, and we have people who develop technology. And my team is the investigative unit, and we've kind of float among the different groups doing some investigative reporting, a lot of Freedom of Information Act requests to get to the bottom of issues related to surveillance technology. Now, our organizing team did want me to plug for you this thing that we have called the Electronic Frontier Alliance. It's a sort of network of local groups that we have to share information and advocacy support on a variety of issues, but often the issues related to policing or the border. So if this group or any of the groups you're affiliated are interested in learning more, you can go to EFF.org/EFA or join-EFA or email organizing@EFF.org, and they'd be happy to give you more information. My specialty at EFF is law enforcement surveillance technology. And a lot of that relates to stuff that you see in cities like drones and license plate readers and camera networks and gunshot detection. But over the last few years, we've expanded this quite a lot to look at border surveillance. And we published our first report in 2020, where we had assessed all the different law enforcement technology used at every level of government in all 23 counties along the US-Mexico border. And you all might have seen around that time, San Diego CityBeat did run our, a portion of our report specifically about San Diego at that time. That report no longer exists because CityBeat no longer exists, unfortunately, but doesn't really matter because there's been a lot more technology adopted since 2020 anyways. But we did just complete 3 trips along the US-Mexico border, where we went in person for several days. And I think we met with some of you, like we met with Maggie along the way. But in July of last year, we did San Diego County and Imperial County. We also did the Mexican side of the border as well. Then in October of last year, we did Arizona, New Mexico, all the way to El Paso. And then just back in March, we did the Rio Grande Valley from Del Rio to McAllen, meeting with various groups, meeting with law enforcement, and then doing a lot of visual confirmation of surveillance technology, taking photos of it, mapping it out. And that's one of the big things that we released recently, and you may have seen this covered in Voice of San Diego or on KPBS. We did release a data set and map of what is now 352 surveillance towers along the US-Mexico border, along with another 50 planned surveillance towers, as well as mapping out all of the border checkpoints that have license plate readers. I'm going to dive into this map a bit more later on, but just so you know, you have it. If you get bored while I'm talking and you want to explore it, the link is just eff.org/border towers. All right, so I'm going to jump into the presentation here. Now, first thing you should know is that this type of strategy is not exactly new. So an academic named CJ Alvarez recently did a presentation that I found interesting, in which he showed this image from the 1930s. This is a very early US Border Patrol surveillance tower. Obviously, it didn't have digital cameras in it or anything like that. It did have, a person who sat up there and probably had binoculars and just was watching the border. So this is something that's been going on quite a long time. Its efficacy has always been a question. But just so you know, I'm just going to give you a broad history. So that's the 1930s. We're going to jump ahead, many, many decades. I think we saw some of the first digital, like the first camera-based surveillance towers go up in the 90s. There may have been some in the 80s. It's really hard to know. A lot of that information has been lost to history, and you'd really have to dive into the stacks to get a really good comprehensive history. But I would say that modern history of this technology is kind of the mid-2000s with a project called the Secure Border Initiative. And that was something that was pioneered by the Bush administration and then picked up by the Obama administration. And the idea was to build all these interconnected surveillance towers to build a virtual wall. And believe it or not, in the late 2000s, there was a lot of bipartisan consensus. Republicans and Democrats came together to call out that this program was a gigantic waste of money and totally ineffective. It's really hard to believe in 2023 that that would be a political position, that Republicans and Democrats would agree that border surveillance was worthless, but that was the case. And they called on the program to be ended after a series of reports. Now, sure enough, in 2011, Homeland Security Secretary Janet Napolitano did cancel the program. They only got so far as building a few of these in Arizona, of these SBI net towers. They just run out of control on spending. They were really behind. They weren't really proving their efficacy, and so they canceled the program. And then, around the same time, here's a headline that I find amusing from the Christian Science Monitor, in which they said, the U.S. cancels the virtual fence along the Mexico border. What's plan B? Well, it turns out plan B is the same as plan A. It is the same plan as the 1930s. Just keep building surveillance towers. Just rename the program, reconfigure how they're bidding out the contracts. Instead of building them and developing them internally from the US government, just find some company that's already been manufacturing them and purchase them from that company, and still go back to this ineffective, very expensive border surveillance wall. And so that's what we saw from about 2012 until where we are today, where there has been a series of different expansions. And then the newest, largest expansion kind of started in 2020 and will go through the next decade or so. So I'm going to take you through the three main companies that provide surveillance towers along the US-Mexico border. Sorry, Maggie asked whether that 1930s tower was located. Actually, I don't. I just grabbed the image from his presentation and I emailed the lecturer asking for more information. He has not responded yet. But when I find out, I will update my slideshow because I think it is pretty interesting. My guess, though, is that it would be somewhere in Texas or New Mexico, just because this was the 1930s and the U.S. Border Patrol started in El Paso. Okay, so the first one I want to call out, you're not going to see these in California. These are only in Arizona, and they are called the Integrated Fixed Tower. These are the direct successor of those SBI net towers that I showed you in the last slide. In fact, many of these towers are built at the same location with the same like electricity infrastructure that was for the previous ones. And Elbit actually was one of the subcontractors on the previous system, and they just got the contract for the new system. Now, the one in this picture is on Coronado Peak in Cochise County, Arizona. I will show you a little bit more close up and what it can do in just a second. But one of the other things I wanted to sort of call out here is that Elbit Systems is best known as an Israeli company that originally developed this technology for monitoring Palestine. And they also provide all sorts of other defense and weaponry technology to various militaries. And in the picture here, the one on the right is just an example of what a control room looks like where people would be monitoring those cameras. So this just sort of shows you what it looks like up close. The capabilities are, first of all, radar. So those white panels on this camera on the right image are radar panels. On the left, that lens on the left is a long-range electro-optical sensor. So that's just basically long-range video. This can apparently go up to 7.5 miles in terms of what it can see. And then the cameras on the right are infrared, so being able to see at night. Now, one of the big new trends in surveillance technology is to make these relocatable. So I'm going to jump back to the slide. And you can see that this is like permanently affixed with a gate and all that sort of stuff. CBP actually wants these to be able to be moved around, even if they're not going to move them around. And so Elbit has designed a new version with the same technology, but you can see it is in a trailer bed that can be towed to a different location. They're not actually going to tow it to a different location because you can see they had to build a fence around it, and that'd be a huge pain. But nevertheless, that's what they want. There are only one of these new versions installed that we know of, and that actually is on a community college campus in southern Arizona. Now, this is probably the most common type of surveillance surveillance tower you're going to find along the U.S.-Mexico border. It's called a Remote Video Surveillance System, or RVSS, and it's manufactured by a company called General Dynamics. You're going to find these in every state. Each one has a platform at the top, usually either a square shape or a triangle shape, and then two sets of cameras. So you can see this close-up image. It's got the electro-optical camera. Again, the range could be up to 7.5 miles. It has what's called the laser illuminator. I don't think this is visible to the human eye, but it is a laser beam that can be used to light things up so that the cameras can see them from far away. There's also an infrared camera, and then there's something that is described as a spotlight with 12 million candle power. I've never seen that used or deployed, so I can't really describe how that looks in practice, but it is attached to each one of these models. Now, you find these often in urban areas. and people don't even know they're there anymore. So here is a scene from Eagle Pass, Texas. So this is a fairground that is right along the border. There are kids playing on merry-go-rounds, etc. And then there's just a surveillance tower just above them. And we talked to people in Eagle Pass, and they thought this was just like a cell tower. They had no idea that this was a surveillance tower that is just monitoring them going about their lives. And with our project, to map these out, this is one of the myths that we wanted to shatter. I think in the public consciousness, these surveillance towers are just in the middle of the desert. They're, only capturing like drug mules crossing the border. They're not really affecting anybody's lives, except for maybe some like ranchers. And it's just not true. Like once you look at where these are in populated areas. These are in urban areas. And in some cases, they are quite literally over people's backyards or looking in their windows on both sides of the border. So you can remember, like I said, these can see for 7.5 miles. I mean, that's basically the entire city of Eagle Pass that it could peer into. This is what the sort of control center looks like for monitoring these cameras. Again, it's not that, it's just a building, usually with like a monitor, a monitor bank along one of the walls, and officers or Border Patrol officials can control them, usually with a joystick, to move them around and zoom in on things. Now, these are in San Diego County. So here are the ones that we have mapped out, in the area. And you can see like there's definitely one over just next to Friendship Park. If you've ever been down there, I'm sure you've seen it. And then there is, a whole bunch in these kind of more industrial areas on the San Diego side, but these are actually populated areas on the Mexican side of the border. And it's important to recognize that, like, Mexicans don't get a say into how the US government spies on them. And certainly it is looking over the border at people just going about their lives. So this General Dynamics also has made a relocatable version of the same technology, same situation, trailer bed, fence around it. It can be moved around if they want to, but they're probably not. These have gone up all along Rio Grande Valley in Texas. So we saw a whole bunch of these on the last trip. These are becoming very, very, very common, but we have not seen these outside of Rio Grande Valley yet. Now, this is probably the most significant one of the newer developments. So, sorry, just to go back, these towers that I've been showing you previously, like the relocatable RVSS, the RVSS, the normal RVSS, the IFTs, these are all anywhere from like 80 feet to 150 feet tall. But the newest sort of model that they started purchasing is from a company called Endorse Industries. This is a Peter Thiel funded company founded by Palmer Luckey, who invented the Oculus Quest VR the Oculus VR virtual reality headset. And he has designed these other kinds of towers called sentries, or in CBP speak, an autonomous surveillance tower. These are only about 33 feet tall. They are a lot easier to redeploy, so to move them around can take maybe an hour or two, although they're also generally staying in the same place. But they've got radar, they've got cameras and infrared that can see anywhere from like 1.5 to 2.5 miles. And they are solar powered. What makes them different than some of the other ones is that these are actually controlled by an artificial intelligence technology that is actually controlling them, making them swivel around. When it used something called computer vision to identify the things that it captures. Is this a person, a dog, a bicycle, a car, a boat? It will actually categorize them. And they're all interconnected. So if you move from the visual range of one tower to the next tower, you are going to get caught on the towers will be able to pass you off to the next one. Like, you're out of the sight of this one camera, the other camera will then pick you up. Now, these are super common in San Diego County. CBP has purchased 200 of these, and they're currently in the process of installing them. The main hotspots for them now are San Diego County, Big Bend sector in Texas, and then in the Del Rio and Laredo sectors in the Rio Grande Valley. All of these have gone up fairly recently, I would say probably in the last 18 months or so. And it's kind of interesting. So we may not have identified all of them. We're using Google Street View and various satellite providers that aren't always up to date to identify them. But it's really interesting because you can look and you can see like they're like 1.5 miles apart. They're almost always 1.5, 2.5 miles apart from one another because that's as far as they can see. I'm going to see if I can just sort of just show you on my map here kind of a little bit more about these. So, you know, we can zoom in and we can see like exactly what these look like from above. So you can see this is the visual footprint of one of these towers. And so I just basically will go into Google Street View and, you know, go up and down every road. Sorry, not Street View in satellite mode. I'll just go up and down every back road until I see one of these towers. But you can see, like, I suspect that there is one somewhere here and it just hasn't shown up on Google Satellite yet. And one day Google Satellite will update and it'll be like right here or something like that. Like they're almost always where you expect them to be. Like once you find one, you just look around and then you find another. So going back to my slideshow here. Okay, so I've showed you 3 different companies and 3 different types of surveillance towers. CBP has suddenly realized that, or at least like 2 years ago, they realized, hey, maybe it's a bad idea to have 3 different models that don't really work with one another. And so they've decided to create a new surveillance program called the Integrated Surveillance Tower Program or the Consolidated Tower and Surveillance Equipment Program. They use both terms. But the idea is that these 3 towers should be all part of one program and they should have some sort of master plan. Some sort of master plan that that incorporates them all and allows them to connect to each other, etc. And so now under this new program, they are really trying to expand the number of towers. So you can see here in the San Diego Valley, sorry, in the San Diego County, or sorry, San Diego sector. So the San Diego sector, they are going to be upgrading 21 of the existing RVSSs. Now, to be honest, I don't think I've mapped out 21 RVSSs yet. So we're still looking for where these are placed. But they're going to actually add 48 more of these. So they're going to more than triple the amount of RVSSs in San Diego County. And then if you look down at the bottom here with El Centro, same thing. I mean, it's not quite, they're, you know, more than double it by adding 66 more towers. And then we actually have they broke it down like a draft of like where these are actually going to go and when these are going to go. And you can see here that the Campo station sector, and you have to look up exactly what Campo covers, that station, but they're going to be putting 5 up this year, another 2 next fiscal year, and then there's a whole other series that they're going to be putting up in various sectors, including 22 new towers in the Imperial Beach station, which is not Imperial Beach, the city, it's just the station is based in Imperial Beach, and then they have an area of responsibility. And then you can see in 2030 and 2031, El Centro, so the El Centro sector, which is Imperial Valley and Imperial County, they are also going to see a massive expansion of surveillance towers. I see some questions in the chat. So which law enforcement receive info signals from these towers? Feds, state, local? Holly, as far as we know, it's just the feds. So we've heard from state and local officials who are really irritated that they can't get access to some of the CBP surveillance technology. But, you know, whether that's formalized or not, or whether they share it on a one-off basis, we don't know. But what we've heard is that CBP tends to keep this within the federal government. And then Margaret asked, how far north in San Diego County have you found the towers? Well, that's an interesting question. So Andorol, which is this one, actually makes a maritime model. So they have a version of this that is designed to watch the ocean. And so we found one as far north as the Del Mar, next to the Del Mar Dog Park, but it's not pointed inward. It's pointed at the ocean. So it's not pointed at the land. But if I go back to our map here, you can see probably the most north one is going to be this one up here near, so we found this one here, which is going to be as almost to how am I going to describe this? Well, you all can see for yourself. But the most north one that we know that's planned is up here near Pine Valley. So they've listed the GPS coordinates that they want to put one right here. So they actually do go pretty far north. We're expecting that like eventually we'll see a whole bunch pop up here near Alpine and Descanso. But just so far, our resources, because we're not using a commercial satellite, we're using publicly available satellite data. We're limited to how often it's updated, and sometimes the satellite imagery is pretty old. So, all right, moving back here. So here is the map of San Diego County where they want to put some of these towers. Now, I want to highlight this one. You see down here on the left, this question mark to the left of to the west of Tecate. So this one is interesting. So we haven't been able to. So this one is Tecate Peak or Cuchama. It's a mountain. We were not able to make it to the top of the mountain. We were only able to see it from afar. And so we're not really quite sure whether they've installed a tower there or not yet, or installed the equipment there. They may have already done it. But this one is actually quite controversial because Cuchama is basically the equivalent of like Mount Sinai for the local Kumeyaay tribes. And so putting a surveillance tower up in the middle of a mountain where they have rituals and ceremonies is quite invasive, in fact. And we've talked to the La Posta band of we've talked to the La Posta band up there, and they are pretty upset about what's going on their mountain. All right, so I'm going to move on to some other types of technologies that you're going to find along the entire border, including in San Diego County. So they have these mobile towers. So these towers that go on the back of trucks. There's two different kind of acronyms they use for these. Mobile surveillance capability is one they use. But I've got two different models here. The one on the left is FLIR, which is a company that specializes in thermal imaging. And the one on the right is a company called Telephonics. The one on the right is definitely a mobile surveillance capability, but the one on the left we've seen called a mobile surveillance capability, but we've also seen another acronym for it. And I'll show you the other acronym in just a second here. But you'll find these parked in open areas along the border. Sometimes they'll be in the same place for months or years at a time. Sometimes they just get moved around a little bit. But these are our medium range cameras that essentially they just Border Patrol officers or other officials just sit in the car watching a screen looking for things. We'll monitor directly on that camera. Another version is called a mobile vehicle surveillance system, or MVSS, also referred to colloquially as a scope truck. This one on the left here that I showed you, this FLIR one, is often also referred to as an MVSS. I don't know why. CBP just likes its acronyms and seems to get confused on its own acronyms from time to time. But this mobile vehicle surveillance system, so the one on the left is one we took a picture of in Texas a couple, back in March. But the image on the right actually comes from some government documents. And what I want you to notice here is that these are not Border Patrol officers monitoring these cameras. These are actually military personnel, either National Guard or straight up from the Army. And as you probably know, military officials are not allowed to do law enforcement operations. So they can't actually arrest people at the border, but they can serve in a support capability. So what you often find is National Guardsmen and military personnel monitoring surveillance, because that doesn't qualify as, that's not the type of thing they're banned from doing. Okay, so now we get into some interesting stuff called aerostats. Now, fortunately, one of these, the nearest one in California is in Yuma. You've never had one of these in California, but you should know that they exist. There are 6 of these along the US-Mexico border. These are permanently affixed at, or permanently tethered at airfields. It does require quite a bit of, because these are so big, it does require to have buildings and personnel stationed there permanently and all sorts of other equipment, but these mostly do just radar. like long range radar looking for cars, boats, low flying planes, that kind of thing. This one would happen to be on the ground when we were driving past, but oftentimes you'll see them in the air if you're in one of these areas. And I included the images on the right because I find this really fascinating. When we talk about militarization at the border, people think we're being hyperbolic and when we're actually being literal. So if you look at the image on the top right, this is from Google Street View in 2013 for the same facility. And it says it's the US Air Force, United States Air Force Tethered Aerostat Radar Site. The image below is one we took in person in 2023. They just changed the sign. Now it's a Tethered Aerostat Radar System with US Customs and Border Protection. So when we're trying to say that this is militarization of the border, we're literally talking about an Air Force facility being converted to a CBP facility. So Jim asked about billions of dollars. How many billions? So to be honest, I think this is just like, it depends on how far back you're looking. Like if you're going back 20 years, then we're talking about billions. But if we're talking about the last like 5 to 10 years, we're probably looking at just maybe close to $1 billion or over $1 billion. But I'm not a specialist in how all the money goes and how they're actually like classifying spending, particularly when it comes to personnel. Now, there's a second kind of aerostat. This is probably a little less than third of the size of the other one. So the first one was called the tethered aerostat radar system. This is called the tactical aerostat system. They're smaller. They do video. So they do long range video. They're not doing radar like the other ones, and they are looking for people. Originally, there were just 4 of these in South Texas. Now there are quite a bit more, but this is where it gets a little bit confusing. So I've showed you on the right here some places that have had tethered aerostat systems, but they may not have them anymore. Now, I want you to imagine you live in Nogales, Arizona, and last summer you're just going about your business. You get up in the morning, you go to your driveway to pick up your newspaper, and you suddenly notice that one of these is flying over your house. That is what happened last summer, in summer 2022. Suddenly CBP, without notice or warning, put up one of these blimps over the city of Nogales. Now, I find the whole history of these, so just to give you an idea of how these work, one goes up in the air, it transmits back to one of these command and control stations where people are watching it on video. If the camera sees like a raft over the Rio Grande River, it lets people know, and then they dispatch someone. At least theoretically, this is how this works. Now, I find stuff pretty amusing with the narrative around these tactical aerostats. So back in 2021, Representative Henry Cuellar started making a lot of noise that these blimps were really expensive, and so the whole program is going to be canceled. So 2021, tactical aerostats going to be canceled. That's what the story is. And the Border Patrol Union made a big fuss. Everyone was upset about it, at least everyone who works in like pro-border security was upset about it. And so suddenly, like without saying anything, this story just sort of disappeared. Then in June 2022, after people complained about the Nogales aerostat, CBP finally put out a press release. And in this press release, they said they are going to be putting up 17 of these aerostats in the 2022-2023 fiscal year. So suddenly they went from 4 of these to wanting to put up 17 of these. So there was one that was supposed to go up, the one that went up in Nogales. A second one was going to be going up in Sasabe, which is not that far from Nogales. And then we were driving around the region. We actually saw one that had not been disclosed before flying over Columbus, New Mexico. But then weirdly, February 2023, there's some sort of leak to Fox News where Fox News says that they're going to be ending the program again. What's going on here? Up and down. Like, this is like a roller coaster with these. Like, first they have them, then they're not going to have them, then they're going to expand it, and then they're going to cancel it. And then according to CBP's budget for the next year, they say they don't need these anymore. They're going to cancel the whole, decommission all the tethered aerostats, and replace them with more towers and other technology. I don't know if this is going to happen or not. This is just the budget. There might be more political wrangling about it, and then they put it back in the budget. It's really hard to say. But if they do go back to 17 of these being up, I do expect that something will end up being deployed in Southern California. Let's move on to some other aerial surveillance. So you're probably familiar with the Predator drones. These certainly got a lot of controversy about 10 years ago when they first started being used. Here's some data from 2011 through 2016 where you can see where these were flying, where these were covering, and you can see they never really quite made it as far as San Diego County in terms of when they were flying. So it's mostly Imperial County and not San Diego County. But now they're using other drones. So originally it was just these big drones that had to be based out of Fort Huachuca in Arizona, but now they've got different ones. So there are these medium unmanned aerial systems that they recently acquired. So last year, the Department of Defense transferred these to CBP. And so these are not things that these are things that have to be transported around on the back of a truck because they are quite large and quite heavy, but they don't require an airfield. What they do require is this catapult that you see on the right that launches these into the air. But basically every Border Patrol sector now has some sort of smaller drone that they can carry in the back of a truck, or they can carry in like a suitcase, and then they can use at the border. These are pretty short range and generally have to be within the line of sight of the pilot, but these are now common and everywhere. I'm going to move on to some other technologies that are important to know about. So license plate readers. So license plate readers are a technology that photographs your license plate, documents when and where it was seen, and then adds it to a database that allows police to either search where you've been over a period of time, or they can add your vehicle to a watch list, and so they'll get an alert whenever your car is seen by a camera. Now, the one you see here on the left, this is a very common system that you see installed at basically almost every Border Patrol checkpoint, as well as every port of entry. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it on your computer, but you can see these cameras, and this camera here next to the Leisure sign says driver. The one beneath it says radar. The one over on the right says front. And then there's one you can't see that says back. And so they are taking pictures of every angle of your car when you go through one of these checkpoints or when you go through a port of entry. And CBP hangs on to this data for 15 years. So they've got 15 years of data if you cross through a checkpoint or through a port of entry. So they don't always have just these obvious ones. They also have ones that are like you see on the right, where it's disguised as a speed camera. But if you look more closely, there is a license plate reader camera taking pictures of your car. Now, whenever you see one of these, you never know who it belongs to. It could belong to CBP, could belong to the Drug Enforcement Administration. It could belong to local law enforcement that it has received funds from the federal government for border security. You just never quite know. But these are, if you're driving through South Texas, you find these everywhere. But you might want to keep a lookout for these when you're driving in the borderlands in Southern California. So one of the things that I want to do real quick, is I want to actually take you through a checkpoint. And so you can see kind of how the surveillance works at one of these checkpoints. One of the things I've been doing lately is you can actually view Google Street View in virtual reality with a virtual reality headset. And so I'll actually go into virtual reality and virtually drive through one of these checkpoints, because generally when you're actually going through them in the real world, you have to burn through them really quickly. You can't take pictures of things. So you don't really get to see what's going on. So this one is near Borrego Springs. You can see there's some stuff here. So here's some license plate readers going one direction, but we're going to go through, and you're going to see. You can see here that it is channeling all traffic through this Border Patrol station. During the pandemic, they were still channeling people through these Border Patrol stations, but they weren't actually stopping people. And that's because this has become a data collection point, not really something where they're interviewing people or searching people. They just want to collect people's data. So as we roll up on this, we're going to see a few things. So right here is where the license plate reader collection point is. So you can see the license plate reader cameras taking all angles of your car. You can see up here is a surveillance tower with some of those long-range infrared and electro-optical cameras. And that is what's going on here. So it's quite interesting. But I also want to show you a different checkpoint in San Diego County, or it might be Imperial County. So also you can see that generally officers are going to be wearing body-worn cameras. For whatever reason, he is not, but they are all supposed to be wearing them. So it's interesting when you see an officer who's not wearing a body-worn camera. I am going to show you another checkpoint as well. So this one is in Ocotillo. It's a very small checkpoint. Like they don't actually stop you here, but I want to show you something really interesting about this checkpoint. So you're rolling up on this checkpoint, you know, it's just got some cones here and you're not really paying attention. And let's see, this thing right here, that is a license plate reader. They have hidden a license plate reader in one of these orange bollards. You would never know it was there coming from this direction, because you would have to actually like pass through and look behind you to see that they've cut a hole in that. Yeah, so I find that really interesting, you know, especially since there's really nothing else going on here. There's a little headquarters that they sit in, but you know, they're not stopping you. There's nobody around, there's no personnel. It's because this is a data checkpoint more than anything these days. I need to re-expand my scene here. Okay, so a few other things that you're going to find. There's these things called unattended ground sensors. Hold on a second here. I need to go back to slideshow mode. These are sensors that I place in the ground to listen to sound vibrations to catch when people are crossing the border on foot. CBP and other agencies have purchased a lot of these things called Buckeye cameras. So Buckeye cameras were originally designed for finding animals. So like the idea was like you put it near a pond on your property, on your ranch, or in the woods, and when an animal walks by, you'd get alerted that the animal had triggered your motion sensor, so you could go out and hunt it or do whatever. But at some point, the company started marketing these for border enforcement. So Cochise County Sheriff's Office and the Yuma County Sheriff's Office in Arizona both have deployed hundreds of these along the border, and they transmit video back that is then watched by National Guards people, or so their recent reports have said. But CBP and ICE and other DHS agencies have also purchased these and placed these around the border as well. Now, I was recently sent some images purportedly of these cameras in San Diego County by a person who so far has remained anonymous. I can't tell you exactly where these are, and I have not independently confirmed these, but I found these very interesting. So here are three different ones. You can see the one on the right has been covered with dirt to blend in. The one in the middle is put in with a piece of trash. And the one on the left has been painted camouflage so that people don't see it. And then, you know, to give you an idea of some of the emerging technologies out there, so DHS or CBP is now trying out these, what they call, they love their acronyms, an automated ground surveillance vehicle. You might see these referred to as robot dogs. My colleagues don't like comparing these to dogs, so they've called them robot pigs. You know, the San Diego County Sheriff's Office apparently wants to get one of these and is calling them just a legged robot. But these things can be, you know, they have payloads, which are often video and other sensor packages. So basically, these are transmitting real-time surveillance video and other data back to some sort of human who is in one of these control centers. And then not exactly surveillance, but one of the other technologies just to know that exists is that CBP has also put these things called rescue beacons out in the middle of the desert with the thought that, you know, you cross the, a migrant crosses the border, they need help, they're injured, they need water, they can go use one of these emergency telephones or emergency transmitters, and CBP will come rescue them. Whether this is actually true or not, or effective in saving lives, that is up for debate, and the data is mixed on that. So I have two other sections about some of the stuff that we see from local law enforcement that are patrolling the border, as well as some stuff on the Mexican side. But before I get much further, I thought I would see if there were any questions on this section so far. See, Mary's asking whether we've showed the slideshow to the ACLU of San Diego or Imperial counties. I did do one for the ACLU of Imperial County. We're in touch regularly with the ACLU of San Diego, but I haven't done the specific presentation.
I have a question. So you have all these towers. It looked like there were different groups looking. There was the law enforcement. There was one picture showed screens that people are looking at. So I guess I'm curious, number one, who's really monitoring these? And if they see something, I don't know, somebody crossing or something that they don't is illegal or they don't like, how does that proceed? Who's called? What do they do? And in your opinion, are they truly effective?
Okay, so on the first question, so they're not exactly transparent, but as I understand it, the towers are either monitored by one of three different types of people. So the first group would be Border Patrol. The Border Patrol would be monitoring them.
Okay.
The second would be some sort of defense personnel, whether that's National Guard or the Army that has been deployed there. That would be the second one. So I mentioned that that is something that often happens. But in some cases, they might have private contractors doing it. So those aerostats that I talked about, those blimps, for example, those are operated by a company called Peraton. So they're contracted out to Peraton, where there's a mixture of Border Patrol personnel and Peraton personnel monitoring and operating the cameras on those.
Are they in other countries?
I believe so, but it's just not my expertise, I'm afraid. Then the second question that Penny had was about whether they're effective. And I get this question a lot. And I feel like the problem with the question is that I don't feel like anybody has like defined the problem they're trying to solve. They've had these towers, like these, towers have been around for decades. And I have never, so as they add more and more of these towers, I have never heard any official being like, hey, the border problem is lessening. Things are getting better. I've never heard anyone say things are getting better. The people who are pushing this technology, they're never like, we put up 10 towers, the border crisis is solved. No, it's just new border crisis after new border crisis after new border crisis. And they just keep spending more money on it. And then nobody is actually very clear about what the crisis is at any given point. And it's this one very expensive thing they're doing to address an undefined problem. But these are like long-term solutions for a landscape that very drastically changes. And a lot of the things that people are complaining about at the federal level are things that a tower is not going to do anything for. Like, like you mentioned today, Title 42 being repealed today, the crisis that they're dealing with today, I'm putting crisis in quotes because I don't believe it's necessarily a crisis, except maybe a humanitarian one. But it's not like an invasion like Texas likes to claim. But it's like, you don't need a surveillance camera to know that there are a whole bunch of migrants camped out under the El Paso Bridge. Everyone can see it with their naked eye that there are people camped out under the El Paso Bridge. And I think same as, there's no shortage of all the cameras being placed in San Diego County along, along that particular stretch of the border. Anybody can walk over there or drive over there. This is not like a secret area. I don't know what they're trying to address. I feel like half the time when they use these cameras, they're just using it to document that people are crossing and not actually intercepting people. They just want to be able to say this many illegal people crossed and not actually do anything to either help them or intercept them. But I guess the other thing I would say is that if we're going to define the problem is how do we make money for surveillance vendors and how do we get the federal government to give more money to hire more Border Patrol officers, making the Border Patrol union so much stronger, then I would say they're incredibly effective. Like they're very incredibly effective as a political maneuver. It allows Democrats to say, we're not building the wall, we're building this other thing. It allows Republicans to say that they're putting money into border security. but it's not like, every time that like the Government Accountability Office or an Inspector General or whoever else goes and looks at these programs, either they're not proven to be effective or they're not even collecting the data that would show whether it's productive, effective or not.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I see Mary Nias.
Hi. Thank you very much for your presentation. Have you followed the money as to these contractors and who they're which members of Congress they are contributing to?
Mhm.
I have not, at least not recently, but I think that's like a worthwhile project. It
Okay.
may be a little bit out of the scope for our organization to do that kind of like influence analysis, because we're really pretty focused on the impact on human rights and free speech and privacy and that sort of thing. And I feel like the influence is a huge problem, but that's probably for another organization like maybe the League of Women Voters to dive into and call attention to.
Or Center for Responsive Politics or whatever.
Yeah, for
The
example.
other thing that I just wanted to, it's just a different perspective on the issue is I was somewhat responsible as a senior park project manager for the Tijuana River Valley for a few years. And obviously it was in the early 2000s and it predated the towers, but there were a lot of buried sensors that I love to trip sometimes. But the thing is, you've got some incredible environmental resources along the US-Mexico border, and you have some endangered species in the Tijuana River Valley and even on Otay Mountain that are not found anywhere else in the world. But yet you have these 19-year-old CBP agents with ATVs that documented in this 1,600-acre park, tore up 100 miles of roads within there. The county of San Diego has since got it down to 23 to 26 roads, and they coordinate with the CBP as to where they're going to use. But I think if it really is to, one, not build walls, but also two, there might be an environmental portion, not that we have to do it to the extent that you're talking about, as well as some of these unstaffed things around Anza Borrego, et cetera. But it's an idea if in fact you can save the environment by not having 19-year-olds on ATVs all over the place and messing up the environment, that might have a slight thing. And just, we should know that might be an argument that could be used as we're trying to dial back and make whatever surveillance, if needed, more reasonable. So.
Yeah, well, what's interesting about that, just sort of I found interesting, is that so many of the locations of these towers we found because CBP had to do environmental impact assessments about the towers, and so they just include the maps or the GPS coordinates, and we're like, gotcha, and and then we were able to map them out related to that. However, something has changed in the last few years, and we're not sure what. So all of those Andorral towers that I showed you, east of San Diego, none of those had environmental impact assessments. None of them that we know of. And so all of the ones that are permanent fixtures tended to have them, but those ones, for some reason, they decided they didn't have to do environmental assessments for. And I don't know if that's because it happened during the pandemic and there were some like regulations lifted that they didn't have to do that. Or my guess, and this is just me speculating, my guess is because they're technically relocatable and not permanent, that they just claim that like, oh, it's just like parking a truck. So it's not that kind of like damage that we would have to do if we were installing like a solar panel with a fence around it or that sort of thing.
There are some things in both the border wall legislation and some immigration legislation, as well as appropriation, that specifically exempted the Army Corps of Engineers and others who are working on the wall, and therefore they may be tearing off of that environmental document that says they do not have to do they don't have to follow NEPA. So.
Yeah, but you can't tell that even if they're putting those towers, they still have to like grade roads to get up there. They're still going up, if not for environmental resources, then cultural resources, like because all that land is traditionally tribal land, and so there's a lot of things that they're just not paying attention to.
So I saw this video once of a drone coming down to someone going through the desert illegally, asking for their ID, etc., and then apparently reporting it. But I mean, the drone was talking to this person.
Well, I haven't seen that, so I would love to learn more about that.
Yeah, right. It was a couple of years ago. I haven't seen anything about it since. Kind of scary.
Well, I will just share a couple of few things just so you know what's going on, because I think there's a misconception that it's only CBP doing some of this stuff. And that's just the changing dynamics of where things are. Now, I don't expect California to get really involved in a lot of this, but you never know. So Texas is being really aggressive with their Operation Lone Star to use their own forces to do border enforcement. And one of the things they have are these SWAT teams called brush teams. They're like these elite soldiers, as they call them, that go and intercept migrants. And now all these brush teams are also equipped with a drone with night vision to help them in their efforts. For years, the federal government has sent funding to local agencies to give them money to buy technology for in exchange for assisting with border security. And so lots of places have purchased license plate readers or these surveillance trailers, or they'll build a camera network along the border, etc. And so, like, here's an example of some of the things that local agencies have purchased with this Operation Stone Garden money for, technically for border surveillance, but you might see it come in for border surveillance and then them being placed at like a mall or a shopping center. One thing I definitely want to call out for folks for Imperial County, and I know this is not San Diego County, but I think it's worth knowing, is that they have a regional license plate reader program that all of the cities and the sheriff participate in, and they are still sharing that data out of state. So in San Diego County, almost every agency has now cut off ICE from their license plate reader system. And I think some people on this call maybe were involved in getting Chula Vista to cut off access to ICE. But Imperial County is still doing it. And so they're doing it with the Customs and Border Protection National Targeting Center, as well as ICE's Homeland Security Investigations Division. They're also sharing it with other states along the border, particularly Arizona, New Mexico, and Nevada, which EFF believes to be against the law as well. And then, there's this thing that happens every year called the Border Security Expo. My colleague, Beryl, different than Beryl, but Beryl, she is currently there right now sending me photos about all the different technologies that are being debuted and promoted at local and federal law enforcement. I mentioned that we have a project called the Atlas of Surveillance. I'm just going to show you what this looks like. It's a database that allows you to put in, any location, let's just say Detroit, Michigan, and it'll give you a list of all the surveillance technology being used in that area. And then you can see the links to the original source material. There's also a map, which sometimes takes a while to load on Zoom. So we'll see if it's even worth bothering with. For some reason, Zoom and there it worked pretty well. So you can see nationwide, like if we were to do, say, automated license plate readers, you can see everyone that we've mapped out using license plate readers in the United States. And then finally, I want to just talk about a little bit about surveillance on the Mexican side of the border, because they are also engaged in surveillance. So one of the things that is different in Mexico that we do not have here is that Mexico tends to use these things called security arches, or arcos de seguridad. And these are just arches over the highways that are equipped with all kinds of cameras, like license plate readers for sure. We're told they also might have face recognition attached to them. And they're just documenting all the vehicles that come and go. Another difference is that they have these surveillance command centers throughout the region as well, that both do 911, they're both a combination of a 911 call center as well as a surveillance headquarters. So you can see here's one of the main rooms of one of these, and you can see There's like a wall of screens. There's usually somebody controlling them. And they call these say cuatros or say cincos or say cinco E's or say seis. Like they just decide to add all these different C words to them, depending on what the capabilities are of the facilities. And so we've mapped these out for the border region. And so you can see there are several in the Tijuana area. We actually were able to personally visit the one in Mexicali, which was really interesting to be able to see it in person. But yeah, there's quite a lot of these across the border. And then finally, the newest thing that we're seeing is out of Juarez, and a thing where the state of Chihuahua is building something called the Sentinel platform, which will have 10,000 cameras spread across 13 cities. It will have license plate recognition, video analytics, so that it's just tracking the movement of objects and the pattern of people walking. It's going to have facial recognition. It's going to have like drones, artificial intelligence, all sorts of stuff. And they even have like this artistic rendering of what their 20-story building is going to be. But you can see like this is all the stuff they say that's going to be in it. There's going to be, it's going to be an unprecedented level of surveillance permeating the Chihuahua region, and may fundamentally change the philosophy of surveillance in the entire borderland region if, when this comes to fruition. And there's even a memorandum of understanding between the state of Texas and the state of Chihuahua, where the state of Texas will be getting access to this system. And what seems to be an unprecedented move for the state of Chihuahua to make an agreement with the state of Chihuahua for border enforcement, which is really none of the Texas's jurisdiction to begin with. Those are the extent of my slides. I've got some contact information if you need me. I'm at dm@eff.org. And I am happy to take more questions or let you all get on to the rest of your meeting.
Man, this is a lot.
Yeah, this is not even my local law enforcement surveillance presentation, which is another hour. It's unfortunate that the surveillance apparatus has grown so large that I can't do this in a 10-minute presentation anymore.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But it
Okay.
kind of sounds like, I mean, is there anyone that truly is doing research to say, this is the number of people we're catching based on, this system, this system, this system, it's getting better and better. I mean, is there anybody to really verify that this system is really a good, all of these are slowing down illegal immigration and the issues we're concerned about?
I mean, every few years, the Government Accountability Office does an assessment of some technology or another. And so then CBP will suddenly produce all these documents saying how many drug interdictions, how many drugs, like pounds of cocaine did they seize because of like involving aerostats. Sometimes they have that, but like we're kind of at the mercy of like when some other government agency decides to do an investigation. I don't think CBP is really doing those numbers itself, or at least releasing them in a way that's verifiable or usable.
Maggie?
Hi. Wow, it's a lot. It's so scary.
This is the second time meeting with us. We've met with you already.
Yeah, I've been scared ever since. So I'm interested in, not right now, but in the way that these weapons, I'll call them, they're tools of war, really, that have come from our Department of Defense, probably activities in other countries. I think that's kind of like a lot of the development of drones and things like that. And it, so to see this then trickle down into our local communities is really horrifying. And the way that our local elected officials have no idea what the capacity of all these tools are, and almost in a consent format on their city council agendas, they literally just pass unanimously the AB 481 military equipment reports every year. And now this is the second year that this process is going forward, and they're not making much adjustments at all, if in any municipality in the state. So this is really horrifying, and we really need this information so we understand the capacity of the tools, the expense, and then the other part of it that I've become more aware of is the cost of training. So personnel costs are another whole like $1 billion for the purchase of these equipment, then there's maintenance, and now they're like a new version comes out, so they got to like get rid of the old ones, probably sell them back downstream to somebody either in the United States or in another country, and then they have to become trained. So that I kind of like am having nightmares about. But I'm also just wondering.
Sorry, I just wanted to, sorry, but you just you said something that just made me remind of a piece of factoid that I forgot to mention earlier. I think as a rule of thumb, anytime you see one of these towers, think $1 million. Like that's like any tower is probably, a little bit less, a little bit more, depending on what its capabilities are and how much it costs to install it. But just like when you look at our map and you see like a community and just think about like, where they've planted one of these towers and be like, what would $1 million mean to that community instead of this tower?
You should see our park, like every year every time it rains, they come and they put dirt back down, and then it washes it all down and it fills the gutter again. And I mean, like it wouldn't take much to fix our park. Yeah. And so this is just infuriating here in Chula Vista, where so much is going into, the drone program, and they've got other things that are borderline, what we've been talking about here. Who knows what they can do inside their new center. And so that's where I wanted to go next, is so they have these control centers with the big bay of monitors, and just how much have you gotten into that part of it, as far as like the collection of the data? You mentioned retention is pretty long for I forget which one you were saying was 15.
License plate readers is the 15-year
LPR is 15.
Yeah.
And so like I know they don't know what to do with it all yet, but they will. And so what types of fusion centers should we be looking out for? And where in San Diego have you looked at any of that part of it? You're saying right now that you don't believe that they're sharing with the local municipalities, but they are gathering, like from our shopping malls. They're taking our ALPR data from private companies and using it, or they have it available to them if they know how to use it. So, but what should we be looking for in terms of fusion centers and data retention capacity for the ones that we have more control over, the local municipalities?
That's a really interesting question. And it's like a different question for California than it is for like other states, because California has the California Values Act, and there's like all sorts of rules regulating when California law enforcement agencies can collaborate with ICE related to immigration enforcement. So there's like a whole bunch of like complications in California that you don't get anywhere else. So just sort of thinking about this. So I would say, in general, right, I'm like in a hard place in trying to describe this technology, because like on one hand, I am concerned about all the different ways it violates people's rights, and it could violate people's human rights, or it could violate people's privacy, like that sort of thing. On the other hand, I'm pretty convinced this is all just garbage to begin with. So it's like a hard messaging to be like, it's very dangerous to people, but also it's a piece of junk. And the way I try to describe it to somebody is that if a cop is holding a gun that misfires 9 times, but will hit somebody the 10th time, it still took 10 shots at you, even if it's a piece of garbage, right? So it's kind of similar like that. And then with regards to fusion centers, so I don't actually hear that much these days about fusion centers and involvement in immigration. And that might just be because people aren't looking or aren't answering those questions. But fusion centers have always been pretty garbage too anyways. Specifically, San Diego's was like one of the ones that was called out in that congressional report several years ago. God, it must have been like 10 years ago now. But it was like they've been blowing a bunch of money on TV screens, claiming it was open source intelligence. And it's like, you bought TVs, you're watching TV. Like that's not anything real. But most of the concerns people tend to have with fusion centers is the way they're being used to spy on political movements and Black Lives Matter protesters and that sort of thing. But that just might be a bias of the people who are doing the reporting on it. I would, so in terms of like things I would be keeping an eye out for, right? Okay, so I would be looking at the return of handheld face recognition in San Diego County. So up until 2020, I believe, up until 2020, there was a program in San Diego that was like one of the first and only of its kind in the country called TACIDS, TACIDS, or maybe they pronounced it TACIDS. I don't know how they pronounced it, but it stands for Tactical Identification System. And basically, ARGIS, which is part of SANDAG, so the Automated Regional Justice Information System, had purchased or contracted for hundreds of handheld, essentially souped up phones. And on these phones was a facial recognition application. And they gave them out to every law enforcement agency, from the sheriff to the police, to every police department, to the SDSU police department, but also to ICE and CBP and every federal officer. And they could just walk around taking pictures of people, and it would try to identify them off the sheriff's mugshot database. And that went on for years. There was a law passed in 2019, I believe, that resulted in a 3-year moratorium on this program, or on face recognition on mobile devices in general, face recognition on body-worn cameras, face recognition on handheld phones, etc. And so that killed the San Diego program for 3, and it made it dormant. That law expired at the beginning of this year. So now the handcuffs are off. They can start using face recognition on body-worn cameras again. They can hand out these devices again. Anyone who is sitting on these devices can start using them again. And we just don't know what the ramifications are going to be. There is a bill in the legislature to put that ban back in place. So that's moving. But for me, I really want to know whether they're going to bring this back, and whether that's an individual agency, like one of the more aggressive ones like Carlsbad or Oceanside, or Escondido brings those back, or whether it is something like SANDAG or ARGIS, because so much stuff gets put through SANDAG. I mean, I don't have to tell the League of Women Voters of San Diego that SANDAG is the most powerful government agency that no one has ever heard of. Bunch of people who are not elected to the board, making all sorts of regional decisions about surveillance technology. But yeah, that's one of the big things I'd keep an eye on. I noted the Imperial County Regional ALPR program. That's certainly on my radar as well. But just getting back to the Fusion Center, is really like overdue for somebody to investigate that again, just because it was so problematic before. But I honestly don't even know they're doing anything like of any value at all.
What is it? What is it, Dave?
So fusion centers were set up, in the post 9/11 period, because they had identified this problem. So the federal government identified this problem in the 911 Commission report, saying none of the law enforcement agencies are talking to each other. That's why, there were, these like hijackers training in San Diego to fly planes, and nobody caught on to it, and blah, blah, blah. Nobody was talking to each other. So let's set up these regional data sharing headquarters throughout the country to facilitate information sharing between various government agencies. So there are like 79 of them now around the United States. I think there are 3, maybe 4 in California. I'd have to look it up. But there's one in San Diego called the San Diego Law Enforcement SDLECC. I think it's the San Diego Law Enforcement Coordinating Center or something like that. And, theoretically, there's supposed to be data sharing going on. Each one operates differently across the country. So the one in San Francisco, for example, is the hub for all the license plate readers. So everybody who uses license plate readers feeds into what's called NCRIC, the Northern California Regional Information Center. And that's not how it works in San Diego. So San Diego, I don't even know what is filling into their system. But usually they just generate intelligence reports. They just generate like, social media says there's going to be a protest, or, intelligence bulletin from DHS says that there's going to be, a rise in fentanyl coming across the border, like that kind of thing that they then distribute. But I don't really know what else they're covering. But these are generally run by a state level entity. But they are formally affiliated with the Department of Homeland Security, but the Department of Homeland Security doesn't run them. But I am just not sure how much they're involved in immigration enforcement.
Okay, this has been fascinating, but it's also time to close up our meeting. Dave, I thank you ever so much for spending all this time with us. It's a
No
whole
problem.
new aspect of immigration that we haven't really learned about.
And feel free to reach out anytime. So I'm here as a resource, and we're definitely trying to do more work in the borderlands. And so it's good to have some connections in San Diego.
All right.
Sorry. Can I just flag one more thing for you all
Sure.
before I forget?
Yeah.
And maybe this is just for the folks who also like cross over the Criminal Justice Committee. The International Chiefs of Police Conference will be in San Diego in October. So the big conference where all the police chiefs come and everybody tries to sell them surveillance technology will be in San Diego later this year. And I will drop off with that and not take up any more time.
Okay. All right. Thanks again. Any problems with the meeting notes? I made one correction that Nancy Pipkin does not come from Seattle, but other than that, anything else? Okay, and I did get a little written report from Robert because he had another meeting all of a sudden. I'll put it in the meeting notes, but the one important thing is that the Good Samaritan Episcopal Church at 4321 Eastgate Mall in San Diego, that's up by UTC, is collecting donations for migrants who are held between the walls. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about what's going on today, feel free to stay on, but I don't want to hold you up any longer. I watched the news this morning, and the Title 42 doesn't end till 9 p.m. tonight, our time. So there are all these people, thousands and thousands of them lined up. The way I read it is if they don't have an appointment through CBP1, they're not going to get through, but I may be wrong. I don't know what's going to happen.
They're being given wristbands on the days that they've received.
Yeah, I read that.
And they processed about 90 yesterday. This is all from the news too. And they have the 10th city that's got a capacity of 500 that there are 900 people in. So I don't know how quickly they may, because technically these people are on US soil and they are arrested. And so they may be processed and then sent back right away, but,
Yeah.
or they may be able to make their case for a credible threat since once it's expiring. But it's good to know about Good Samaritan because I'll be going there for something else shortly. But I also, because of the Times of San Diego, not any other news source, I discovered that they really are near Borderfield State Park as far as volunteers handing out things. And so I will probably make a smart and final run today or tomorrow and bring a friend who's disabled to stay in my car and charge cell phones if we need to. But you know, thus far, there's not any. It's nice to know that Good Samaritan Episcopal is doing something organized, but I was having a hard time finding anything organized. It all seems to be ad hoc, which we're all capable of doing. So that's good.
Border Angels is probably doing stuff too. Yeah. Okay. Well, we're going to meet next in June. And it's June 8th. I will just be back from a trip, but I will look forward to seeing you then. I've asked a couple people to speak and not hearing from them, so we'll see. We may just talk about what's going on at the border next time. Okay, the state convention is coming up in a couple of weeks. And the state immigration interest group is doing a caucus and a presentation on immigration. But it's only in person and it's only for delegates, so the rest of us are kind of in the dark, although we will get a report from Jane Andrews next time as to how it went, and maybe she could run through the slides for us. So that may be the agenda next time. Okay, have a good spring, summer month, and enjoy the warm weather while we've got it. Okay, thanks for coming.
Thanks for
Bye-bye.
organizing. Have a good one, everybody. Bye-bye.